Okay. Hello, everybody. Good evening and good morning to all of our audiences in the different time zones. It's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Zeest Qureshi, and I'll be moderating this panel with the very esteemed and accomplished women who are here with me today, Shiba Najmi, Nida Athar, and Navera Waheed. I would first like to give quick intros about all three of these women, and then start our Q&A and just a general discussion around how we can create strong pipelines for women in tech and entrepreneurship. So I'd like to start with Shiba Najmi. Shiba is the founder and CEO of Code for Pakistan, has in the past been a fellow in 2012 for Code for America. She has worked in user-centered design and is very focused on building bridges between the government and citizens and creating solutions that empower citizens as well. She's responsible for running the first ever hackathon, and she is doing some very interesting things that we will be talking about in our conversation today. Next, I move on to Nida Athar. She is the co-founder and director at Ventures Global, which is an accelerator and venture lab. Her focus is mentorship and acceleration of women-led startups and helping them leveraging the infrastructure that they may not have access to otherwise. It's a pleasure to have you here with us, Nida. And third, we have Navera Waheed with us, who is a two-time founder, first at Cygnus Dev and then at Orbit Education. Her specialty is AR and VR, and we're going to be having a conversation with her about how she's leveraging VR in Orbit Education, which is an edtech platform, to help learning online work even better and make more immersive experiences. Thank you, all of you, for being with us today. It is a pleasure to have you. I would love to start our Q&A by a very important question, which is that all three of you have done something very specific, very interesting, and are trying to, make space for other women as well. So, and I think I'll start with you, Shiba, because I know that a lot of the work that you do is focused on human-centered design and how we can get solutions out of people and empower citizens to create solutions. So I want to talk about some of the work that you've been doing with the government in the past, the fellowships that you've been running, and some of the internship programs that you were launching. How do you think that you can create strong pipelines as a woman who has been through the system for other women who are entering it now?
Yeah, thanks so much for the questions, Zeest, and the warm introduction. So as you pointed out, the space that Code for Pakistan is working in, I'm going to share a little bit of context about what the problem is that we're trying to address, and then get into addressing, how we're doing that. Imagine, the kind of efficiency and convenience for a citizen where you can find a life-saving drug in seconds, or you can file your taxes in minutes, or you can set up a business in hours, and not be embroiled in countless cumbersome procedures or wait in long lines at NADRA or at your driver's license office. So that's sort of our ultimate vision, which is how can we make government services seamless and meet people's needs where they are, just the way that we're used to in the private sector. Code for Pakistan is a nonprofit. It's a team of technologists and industry experts, and many of whom volunteer their time. And we also have a full-time staff of employees as well, trying to build a civic innovation ecosystem where the government works for everyone seamlessly. And as technologists, what we believe is that we have access to a way of thinking and technical skills and design skills that are not generally present in government. Right? And we have to bring those skills to partner with government in order to bridge that gap of innovation that exists between the private and public sectors. And so in terms of the way we approach this at Code for Pakistan, we take a number of different tacks. There's a fellowship program that we have been running with the KP government, the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa government in Peshawar for the last 7 years. And there are 20 full-time fellows that are partnered with different government departments for 6 months. And they create technology solutions that serve the needs of citizens. As you said, we follow a very human-centered design approach to understand the needs of citizens and to understand the needs of the government partners and create these solutions. That's one of the things we do. We've been running this fellowship program in collaboration with the KP government and the World Bank since 2014. And so far, there have been 107 fellows who have completed the program. They've partnered with 26 different government departments, and they've created 37 solutions so far that have served 1 million citizens. And they saved the government about 60,000 hours of work. And as part of that, we've also trained over 300, close to 350 government officials, because that culture change needs to happen within government. So in terms of the pipeline for women and, what we did was, in the past, we've done a number of things, and that's just the fellowship program. So we've done things outside of the fellowship program, like we did an open source day for women in partnership with Habib University in Karachi, which actually Huma Hamid, who's the co-founder of PWIC, was the one who was running that in partnership with Code for Pakistan to teach women how to do open source development. We've had, speaker series in Islamabad on women in tech. But when it comes to this fellowship program, it's been very interesting. We've had a 25% quota for women fellows in Peshawar. And the strongest candidates we've had over the years, women candidates, tended to be in the fields of graphic design or content writing, not hardcore sort of engineering development. So through the fellowship program, we've been building both the technical and soft skills of young women while also growing their professional development skills. And there's a lot of focus on supporting fellows to develop their communication skills and presentation skills. There's mentorship, events, networking opportunities, also with the Code for All community, because Code for Pakistan is a part of this global network of organizations that share knowledge and best practices with each other. And the hope is that with all of this coaching and training, this prepares the women to avail better job opportunities after they graduate. And some of them have. Some of them have actually gone on and set up their own IT companies or, gone overseas with internship programs. But despite all that, although all of that, we noticed that there are significant obstacles, obviously, to women's participation in the STEM fields. And so the strongest women candidates we were seeing were in content writing and graphic design, not in more technical fields. So even when we receive thousands of applicants each year for those 20 positions, we've struggled to recruit even 5 women out of this annual cohort of 20 fellows to work with the government. So our head of fellowships, she did a deep dive and did secondary research, and she found that fewer women complete technical courses and programs, and the dropout rates remain high. How can we actually address this from a systemic level? And so she proposed this idea of a women internship program, where essentially there would be women interns who would be partnered with the fellows and attend all of the government sessions, learn how to work with government, do product development alongside the fellows, and learn all those skills and receive mentorship, etc., with the goal that the following year, then they could apply to be fellows. And she proposed this to the KPIT board and the World Bank, and it was approved, and we're really excited that it will be launching this year. And we've specifically created it as a remote model, with the option to show up in person if you want to, but remote so that a lot of cultural issues, transportation issues, those things that are challenges that women face in accessing opportunities can be mitigated. And also it will open up the door to women all over KP. They don't just have to be in Peshawar. So I'm going to stop there, but that's some of the work that we're trying to do, which is really look at it at a systemic level.
Thank you so much, Shiva. I think that that's a very important autonomy generation between women and empowering them to sort of learn and then be able to apply to become fellows, like you said. So it's a fantastic program. Adapting it virtually, it must have been a challenge, and I would love to come back to you on that after I get some input from both Nida and Navera. So Nida, coming to you, I know that you have had a lot of focus on women-led startups, and one of the conversations that I remember having with you is about the kind of disproportionate effects of the pandemic, supply chains being damaged and everything, and how you used, your skills and your mentorship to help these startups sort of navigate those waters, those very tricky, uncharted waters. So if you could elaborate on that, and I know you're about to run a second cohort, so if you could just sort of continue and end on that note, I would love to hear from you.
Thank you for this opportunity. So first of all, it's the third cohort that we are now about to go into. When we started doing this program, the first cohort was done completely traditionally. We had the usual way of doing things. Right when we were about to announce the second cohort, that's when the pandemic struck. And we were at a crossroad, whether do we want to do this program, because there were lockdowns everywhere. The hotels were closed, the banks were closing, the corporates were being shut down by the government. There wasn't even an option of 50% workforce. So at that point, we were at a junction: should we delay the program or should we go on as we could? And we were lucky enough that our sponsors were supportive enough to toy with the idea that why don't we go and implement this program entirely virtually. So we shifted the whole program right from call to action all the way up to the graduation of this program. All of it was done virtually. And as a result of it, we were able to implement this program. The first cohort just had applications from the tier 1 cities in Pakistan, and that too just Karachi, Lahore, and Islamabad. When we went online, SC Women in Tech program successfully was able to trickle down to smaller cities as well, because there was no restriction for these women to travel. There was no restriction in terms of stepping out of the house, dealing with how to get from point A to point B. As Shiva also pointed out, there are a lot of cultural contexts in Pakistan that girls and women have to deal with, even when they have to step out of the house for 5 minutes. And this, you're talking about starting your own venture, which is another, an altogether a different beast that they have to handle at home and get the permissions around in some cases. So everything was done in the comfort of the home. For these women, we were able to get a far more higher number of applicants, almost double as compared to cohort 1. From 3 cities, we went up to almost 7 to 8 cities. We had participants who qualified for the program from Mardan. We had people from Peshawar. We had Karachi, Lahore, and Islamabad as well, of course. And the other interesting thing that transpired within this training, we saw was a higher level of engagement between the participants themselves, as well as our interaction with them. We were able to create a safe space while we were online. Otherwise, we weren't able to do this, because the training traditionally was then, in the past was being done in 3 centers in Karachi, 1 in Lahore, and 1 in Islamabad, through, again, virtual platforms of the bank. But there was no intermingling between the participants between Lahore and Islamabad and Karachi. So we were really lucky about that. So the pandemic helped us create a more gelled-in cohort compared to the first one. Interestingly, at the same time, we were also dealing with the grant management of the first cohort. They had given an entirely different set of deliverables. SC Women in Tech is a performance-based grant, so it's not that you win the competition and you get the entire money and then thank you very much, we'll see you somewhere down the line. But it's not like that. It works in tranches. Again, I would give the credit to Standard Chartered for this, that they were supportive enough and understanding enough to understand that whatever deliverables and metrics that the businesses had given us, they weren't going to be delivered. There was no way that they would meet these targets. One of the businesses was in a clothes rental business. That startup was completely shut down. If you look at it, nobody wanted to rent clothes which were pre-loved. There were no weddings going on because they were luxury items and party wear. So they came back to us and they said, what do we do? And they came up with an idea: why don't we start a line of, a whole different line of clothes which were brand new, and a whole stylized line. There was another business which was engaging home chefs, and it was a food business. They got shut down. They persevered time and again. They kept on, they had to lay off people, then get them back in. So, the supply chains and everything were challenged. The way that we thought that we would be doing business 3 months ago was completely, the whole books were rewritten in this time. Women were affected, especially these entrepreneurs, because their businesses were small. Their leverage of finances, their experience and everything was far more limited. Their customer base was such that, they were, again, users who were not used to seeing them in a different way of operating. So they had to do a lot of things to get back, on their feet. But, things bounced back. There was Trashit was also part of our cohort. Their main idea was to do organic waste collection from restaurants and schools. They were shut down. Their entire supply chain was canceled out. So they went into an entirely different model of providing, home gardening products and training. So at one point, yes, the pandemic challenged their usual businesses, but at the same time, it was an opportunity for these businesses to get into newer ways and then pivot into an entirely new line of business. And Alhamdulillah, right now, all of them are surviving businesses.
That's so wonderful to hear, Nida, and thank you so much for giving examples of how, innovation took place. And we did see a lot of growth in the sector, in the ecosystem, despite the pandemic. In Pakistan, we saw some excellent, fundraising rounds as well. So I know that there was hope, and I'm so glad that these businesses are surviving right now. I would like to now come up to Navera. So both Nida and Shiba, you've mentioned about shifting online, virtual, adaptation of anything that you were doing before. And Navera, this is where your specialty comes in. So first, I'd like for you, because I myself am a layman, I'm not a technologist, and I would love for you to also talk a little bit about augmented reality, what it actually is, and make it sort of a simple explanation for our audience. And also then talk about how you came up with the idea and what is Orbit doing to make learning easier and immersive, and what it takes to adapt something that you can facilitate in person online in an effective manner. So, I give you the floor. Navera, you're on mute.
I'm sorry about that. So thank you so much, Zees, for this opportunity, first of all. So Orbit is basically an immersive platform. We work with AR, VR, but because schools usually they don't have these sort of devices available, so we also made our product available for web. And right now, most of our users, especially in Pakistan, they use it on web more than the immersive experience. So our product is basically, it's completely gamified, and we tried making learning fun. So I'll just explain with small example. If you know about seasons, there was this study that about 50% of Harvard graduates, they don't know why seasons happen, why do they change. Most of the people, they think that because it is because of the orbit. At some places it's closer to the sun, and on some places it is far from the sun. So that is why seasons, the phenomena of seasons that happen. It is basically because of the tilt of Earth. So Earth is tilted at 23 degrees, and that is why seasons happen. So when we teach this to children through immersive platform or web platform, we just don't tell them, they get to play with it. So they can change the rotation to 0 or to -23 or to 180. And then they see the effects that happens to the Earth because of that tilt. And then there is a complete game, which they have to find a safe haven, let's say on 0 degrees or on -23 degrees. And they get to learn that what sort of climate changes would occur when they change that angle. What will happen to the Earth? What will happen to the continents? What will happen to the oceans? So they get to see all of these things. And that is how they learn. And most of the students that we teach, they always say that they have never learned like this. And this was actually fun. And we're very proud when we get to hear these sort of things. So this is basically what Orbit is in a nutshell. And yes, we also faced a lot of problems with pandemic. Our product was designed to be taught in classroom with a teacher. So when schools closed down, when there were lockdowns and online classrooms were happening, teachers were not really sure that how can they use our app, and it was a chaos in our lives too. But as Nida mentioned, a lot of businesses pivoted. We also pivoted. We changed our business model from B2B to B2C. Uh, because of lockdowns, there's a huge gap uh, appeared in B2C market. And that's where now we are trying to work out. We started recently, and I think it's going pretty great so far.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Navera, for talking about it and explaining us in simple terms what is it that Orbit is trying to achieve. And I think there's a very important need right now for these edtech platforms. I would like to have a couple of follow-ups, but coming back to Shiba, you talked about the virtual implementation of the fellowship program as well as a women internship program. And having been and lived in Pakistan for so long, I know the services, that the public services, and it's so hard to access them online. And I know you've managed to do and improve this by initiatives like the Rabta app in the past, but I would love for you to talk about how you were actually adapting this virtually for the women, given that the public services are not that virtually adaptive. And it's very difficult to sort of bridge that gap, as it is the aim for Code for Pakistan. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So imagine, so working with government, which, is a legacy institution, it requires a lot of in-person meetings, right? Government employees aren't used to Zoom or even really responding to emails. So everything usually happens over chai and tea. And so pre-COVID, our 20 fellows would sit together in the Durshal space in Peshawar, where we also bring in speakers and coaches. And in some cases, they would be placed within the government departments. But either way, the fellows would be making multiple trips to the various government departments to gather requirements and for brainstorming with their government partners. So the sixth fellowship cycle last year was all set to launch in April. And in March, we were just concluding recruitment of the fellows. We'd already figured out the government departments we were, which problem statements we were going to work on, which government departments we would partner with and stuff like that. And then in March, when the lockdown started, our team in KP had to very quickly adapt. So they went back to the drawing board. They delayed the launch of the fellowship cycle by a few weeks, and they completely redesigned how to run the fellowship. Within 2 weeks, they put together a proposal for a mostly online fellowship program. And the proposal was then approved by the KPIT board and the World Bank. But even after that approval, it took a fair amount of convincing for a lot of the government partners for a while. And they would often say, well, we're showing up to work. Why aren't you showing up in person, right? And so what we also did was we reevaluated the government problem statements we had received, and we narrowed them down, from basically what we had chosen earlier was suddenly all shifted, because now there were high priority departments that needed to support COVID under this state of emergency. And so we did a couple of projects with the Department of Health instead, related to COVID, as well as some of the other projects. So what we did was that before the fellowship, the interviews and technical tests of the fellows and hiring, they were all done remotely over Google Hangouts. And the candidates were asked to turn on their videos, so we ensured that the right candidate was appearing for the interview. If they faced any technical issues, which a lot of them did during the interview, interruptions and stuff, we allowed them time or we rescheduled it. And we interviewed 120 candidates remotely this way for those 20 positions. This was after shortlisting it from, over 3,500 applications. So the interviews were then carried out in 2 rounds, because, as I mentioned, the Department of Health had requested that one of the fellowship teams start working right away, immediately, on this time-sensitive COVID data collection and patient management project. And so within 3 days, our team interviewed 24 candidates, and then the second round of interviews began a week later, where the remaining 96 candidates were interviewed. But one upshot of the remote fellowship was that the fellows didn't need to be based in Peshawar. The fellowship program is technically open to anybody in who has KP domicile. So we had fellows from different parts of KP applying. We organized for the first time a pre-fellowship boot camp to prep the fellows for remote work. And then we redesigned all of the activities for remote work. For example, the daily stand-up meetings became daily stand-up calls. The meetings with focal people from the government departments were conducted using Google Meet, and the prototyping and MVP development and all of that was done online. And used tools like Trello for task management. And the user research was also conducted online. So usually we would go and do user research in person in the fields where people were, but they collected responses via WhatsApp, and they conducted user interviews and calls over WhatsApp or the phone, and used online forms. So for example, for this COVID project, they interviewed field data entry operators located in remote districts of KP this way. The workshops were done in an interactive way using online collaboration tools like Google Jamboard for design-related activities. And I think probably the biggest challenge was that our management team had to be creative about how to build the bonds between the fellows who weren't sitting in the same space developing their projects or sitting through the curriculum sessions together. And I'll talk about this in a second. But essentially, just to wrap up this picture, we held the demo days and the graduation ceremony online, which were definitely challenging to convince the government to do so, because there's a protocol and there's a way of doing things that government is used to. And of course, anytime there were any in-person meetings that they did have to go, they made sure to follow SOPs and wear masks and things like that. So the one thing that I was going to mention is that for anything that moves online, online communication is different from in-person communication. In our case, specifically, in-person communication is usually at Durshal under the physical supervision of our fellowship managers. So I think all online programs must be prepared to handle a kind of tone of voice and cyber, like aggressive communication. And the women in the cohort definitely, like, we noticed something there, that there was, I'm not sure, I wouldn't call it cyber harassment, but it definitely felt aggressive. And, so we noticed that. We hadn't been prepared for it because it had never been an issue before, but immediately took steps to address it. And I think that now that this year that we're launching the Women Internship Program, which will be remote, we're investing in a lot of extra things like the gender sensitivity trainings and having HR folks come in and speak to fellows and interns about professional communication, and how to share, reporting mechanisms and things like that.
Thank you so much, Shiba. And I think that that's very important and relevant, because having worked in EdTech myself, this is something that I also faced, because online communication is very tricky. Opening yourself up to all of that vulnerably, especially for female students who were trying to, learn online. And I love the innovation that you came up with and how you collaborated with the government agencies as well. I want to track back to Nida. And Nida, since let's just zoom out to the big picture of today's conversation, which is creating strong pipelines, right? So I see InnoVentures as a venture lab, as an accelerator, as an organization that creates investment opportunities. And there are so many facets that you're currently working on. I'm very curious to know a little bit more about what led you to realize that all of these things are important to be tapped into, and that you needed to be a one-step solution for your startups and the cohorts that you were running, because you felt the gap in the market. What motivated you, and how you sort of ended up coming to this, that you are now running the third cohort, taking application to the third one?
All right. So there are 2 or 3 things that we mainly do at InnoVentures. One of them is, of course, the industry linkages and the linking academic research, academia to the industry. This actually started happening when we were running Pakistan Innovation Foundation, and through our early works there were a lot of things. There were innovations, there were solutions, there were early stage ideas that we were coming across. We would hear these ideas. They would take, there were founders who were taking part in our competitions. They were winning these competitions as well. And down the line, 6 months, 1 year, or 2 years down the line, you would not hear of those people again. 6 months further down, you would see them working somewhere else. And when you would go and talk to them, they would say that, oh, we weren't able to get the traction for that business. We didn't know how to convert that business idea into a practical business. Then there were some issues around monetization. And these were solutions that would have an impact on the society. These were solutions that could grow into global solutions as well, perhaps. And that's where we saw the need that there is a lot of things going on at university levels, but these universities don't know how to convert these innovators into people who can have the prerequisite of starting a business. Yes, there are business incubation centers there. There are some universities who have been successful in doing so, but by and large, that is not what is happening. Be it area of your social innovation, in the tech areas as well, technology-based startups especially. You see a lot of techies who have fantastic solutions. They are very good at building the products, but they are so married to that idea that they don't want to go to market as well. So these were the small areas that kept on coming time and again, that we realized that, okay, this is one thing that we need to get into. The second thing was something that was close to my heart, which is business, working with women entrepreneurs. I work very closely with girls, trying to engage them, to take up STEM careers. That is something that I do out of my platform of Pakistan Innovation Foundation, and something we've been doing for the last 4 or 5 years of working with teenagers, trying to get them to take up STEM-based careers. We give them a hands-on learning experience of what it's like to be in a university, what it would be like to take up research, what it's like to actually work in a lab. And we do that for 10 days through a residential program. And the impact of that, when you do the role play, when you actually go ahead and do the research, when you collaborate with professors, it has a very profound effect on these teenagers. And so far, we've seen very good results. But even in that program, I kept on seeing that the girls, were dropping out. First of all, there was a very low rate of girls applying for this program. Although they were very smart girls, I would talk to the teachers. They would tell me, yes, we have these, 4 or 5 girls who are really outstanding in their academics. They are very curious. They do tend to do a few experiments now and then, and they've, done science fairs and all. But when I would go ahead and see their applications, they would not, the name would just not be there. So I started doing ground level engagements with the schools as well. And the same phenomena was happening in the entrepreneurship space as well. You would go to the networking events, you would see all of these girls hanging around, these women hanging around. They would be the co-founders, they would be the product developers, they would be the designers. They would have their own ideas as well, but they would not have the confidence to come forward and say, okay, now I want to start my own business. So there was a gap over there. We started going in there, and also the women, excuse me for saying so, that most of the women businesses that are there, they seriously lack professionalization. There is no business structuring there. They are not taken seriously enough. Their business are not structured properly. Their finances are not in place. The registrations are not done. These are very basic things that you need to educate women entrepreneurs for, because it's not that they don't know the business, that they don't know their customers, that they don't have an idea. It's just that they are not investment ready. Because of that, there is, they are unable to get the breakthroughs that they need and capture a higher number of markets. So that was one area that we got into. And the third one that we do is, again, the venture lab that we run. In that, what we do is we take either idea stage businesses or early stage businesses, and we try to, again, commercialize academic research into something that might become a commercially viable idea and a business. We do that at a very small scale. At the end of the day, when you look back, all of these things are linked together. They are not really different fields, things that we are working with. All of the work that we do is either one step ahead of what we are doing with PIF, or one step behind of what we are doing at InnoVentures. So, It's just when you go out and you work with people, you work with the community, you see a need, and then you step into it. That's what we've been doing with InnoVentures.
Thank you so much, Nida. And I've got a couple of questions for both Shiva and yourself. Shiva, another thing that came to mind is that you talked about creating space for, training people to interact online. And I am just very curious about how you curated these trainings. What went into, what was the material, and how do people, specifically men, respond to trainings on how they need to communicate online, and what are the ethics that they need to follow about with regards to this sort of kind of communication?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think the real test of it will be with this upcoming cycle and the Women Internship Program. But essentially, in this instance, we were responding to what we were seeing on the fly. And our fellowship team was extremely quick to respond to that, which is great. In our team itself, so actually, let me take a step back. At Code for Pakistan itself, we have a very strong culture of diversity and inclusion and sort of, respect for, we have a lot of women leaders on the team, and our culture and values and ethos at an organizational level, and we have a code of conduct, for all of our civic hackathons as well as at the organization. So all of those we start with already. So our team itself is has that ethos. In the KP province, our team on the ground is all men. They are led, our head of fellowships is a woman. And so, with that background in mind, they're extremely, our entire team is very aware of these issues and tries to track them. So when some of these issues came up, they immediately turned to some partnering organizations. So for instance, we do everything in collaboration. There are experts that we know, for example, the Digital Rights Foundation that's led by Nighat Dad, whom we reached out to and we said, hey, help us pull some of these elements into our curriculum, because we're seeing that we actually need to address this head on. Sometimes you just assume, when your entire organization has a certain value and ethos that that others will also have it, right? And I think we just sort of assumed that our fellows would and others too. But we realized, no, this is something that actually really needs to be brought into the curriculum and it needs to be codified. And so we've been working with the Digital Rights Foundation for them to conduct some sessions on this. We worked with HR partners. So immediately when this happened, or when the women on the team just felt like they had a concern, our team from Islamabad went to Peshawar, and included an HR partner, and all of these were women. And as well as actually men from our team as well, and went and addressed the fellows and talked about this, listened to their concerns, listened to their grievances, and said, okay, let's see how we can address this. And I think being really conscious about that and addressing it head on is really important. So in addition to some of the gender diversity stuff that and coachings and trainings that we are very sort of explicitly including into the curriculum, where everyone's going to sit down and talk about how do we do online communication. We are also thinking about, how do we support the growth of these women as leaders? And that includes a lot of different things, obviously the technical skills and those kinds of things that they will gain through the internship program, including attending daily scrums remotely, seeing how government works and partnering with government. And those are some of, communication skills and training in terms of presentation skills, and those kinds of things should bring leadership as well. But I think that in addition to that, being extremely explicit with both the men and the women in the fellowship and in the internship about what makes for a good culture. What do women experience? Why is it that, as Nila was mentioning, so many women drop out? What is it about the culture that there are so many implicit biases that we don't even realize and recognize? And the fact that they need an extra leg up, right? Like the cultural norms and society and are set up in a way that it's not easy to do stuff as a woman in Pakistan when you're trying to get into tech or you're trying to be an entrepreneur. And this is not specific to Pakistan, obviously. All over the world, we know that 25% of computing roles are filled with women. So there's a huge disparity. I think that I think shifting the balance, I think it's important to understand that there are systemic changes that are needed. So one is creating opportunities, for instance, what we're doing through the Women Internship Program. And that needs to proactively happen by building relationships like with the Digital Rights Foundation or with PWIC that have access to the talent and sort of really doing extra, going out and trying to recruit. And we've been doing that for a while. But that also needs to be done hand in hand with cultural shifts, right, that happen, frankly, both at home and in the workplace. So in the workplace, this also includes the way we conduct interviews, right? And some of the other things I mentioned, like gender sensitivity trainings and enabling remote collaboration, transportation, creating HR policies, and just making sure that the environment is conducive to women's participation.
Thank you so much, Shiva. I think that really encapsulates the areas that do need work and also the reasons why women seem to drop out in that space. Coming back with the question to Nida, so you talked a lot about how we turn innovators into businesses, right? Like, so innovations need to also then make money to be successful. And it's even more important for women to do that in order to continue to have that independence and continue to be in that space. Keeping that in mind, I really want to know what you think, because you saw the gap in the market. Aside from incubators and accelerators, what kind of infrastructures are essential in our space, in the environment, in the public space for entrepreneurs and especially female entrepreneurs to succeed? What do you think, in your opinion, is missing out there that we need to sort of address?
So there's a lot of there's a pattern that I see in the market repeatedly. Businesses जो है वो एक incubator से दूसरे incubator के ऊपर they keep on switching, they keep on hopping from one incubator to a next. They are taking the same training from one place, then they go on to the other till the time that they land some investment or the other. At one point it's okay, but I believe that as ecosystem builders we also need to have some responsibility to get to kind of like push them off. Okay, nahi, ab tumne 3-4 jagahon se training le li hai, why don't you try to test the market on your own? Let them be a bit brave as well. There are two things that will happen out of this step. Should we be brave enough to do that? One, it will free up space for more ideas to come in, because it will free up space in the incubators for more seats, for more new businesses to come in. At the same time, it will only be the survival of the fittest. The businesses that are smart enough to understand that whatever they're trying to sell is not what the market wants, then they will either pivot or either they'll get a reality check. What needs to be done, I believe your second part of the question is, what do we need to do other than what the incubators are doing to get the startups? Sorry, could you repeat that again? The second part of your question was?
The second part was, so aside from incubators in the public space, what do you think is missing? Like, what else can we give, especially for female entrepreneurs, to help them succeed?
There are two things: a safe space to run their businesses from. We also need to give them places that are specially tailored for their needs. When I'll give a very basic example. I was operating my company out of one co-working space here in Islamabad. 2 to 3 years down the line, they closed down the childcare area that they had. And I don't know about other people, but for me, it had a huge setback. I used to take my baby on and off to work there. You can't keep on doing this. If you create a space for women, you have to understand what their needs are. They need to have easier access to public transportation. These spaces need to be secure enough. These spaces need to have a secure meeting space for them to meet other people as well. And at the same time, these spaces also need to create a certain sort of a training program that are catered especially for what women businesses need. Again, I don't want to repeat my point, but the same script of the professionalization of their businesses, provide them business supports in terms of what could be legal advice, could be financial financial advices, accountancy services, and also pitching services. They also need to build a pipeline of helping them connect with angel investors, with VCs. They need someone to advocate for them, to go and talk to the people who have pockets, who are interested in investing, for them to find out that, all right, these small businesses also exist, that they have the potential to to grow bigger. For women, I believe these are the things that we need to do to begin with. We also need to go back to the women businesses and tell them that, the way that things are happening right now, you need to kind of to come out of that shell, and then start doing things a bit more in a bit more formalized manner.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything that you've mentioned. And I think that you and Shiba have sort of collectively made the point, which is that safe spaces are important. And, women need to, A, be a little more braver, and B, also need to be a little more supportive of the work that they're doing and give them the space to exist in that space. Coming back to Navera, and thank you so much for being so patient while we took questions from the audience. So you are a founder, a two-time founder, based out of Pakistan, studied here. I want to know the kind of obstacles that you faced, because you first set up Cygnus Dev and then you went on. And I want to know a little bit about your journey from Cygnus Dev to Orbit Ed, because I think that you could reflect on it on a more empathetic, personal level than perhaps I could or the rest of us.
It's a great question. Thank you, Zees. So when I graduated from FAST, I was basically employed in Telenor. Telenor was my first employer. I worked there for 2.5 years, and with that, I started working on Cygnus. So Cygnus was a purely IT services company. There was no product of our own. I got to travel to IBLP, which is sponsored by State Department. And there, over a Thanksgiving dinner, I was able to crack a deal of $500,000. And when I tell people this, they get very shocked, because that was basically a cultural exchange program. You don't really sell, or you sell your services over there. But luckily, I was able to. I came back. Wajiha and I, we were both in Telenor. We quit our jobs and we were committed to Cygnus full time. We made good revenue, and then we bootstrapped and invested in Orbit. So that is how Orbit came into being. We knew that from the beginning that we want to have our own product, but there were no means. As Nida mentioned, investment in Pakistan is not that easy. It's not like I have an idea and I can just go and get investment. It's not going to work like that. And back in 2016, 17, it was completely not like that. So we started working on it, developed this MVP, went to schools, and proved that this is a viable solution. People are going to pay for it. And then we started applying in accelerators. So we got into 2 accelerators, first in Amsterdam, then in LearnLaunch. LearnLaunch is a very ethics-specific accelerator, and it changed our product altogether. One line that we kept hearing at LearnLaunch was, your product should not be a vitamin. It should be a painkiller. So if you keep selling vitamin, nobody will buy it, because it's vitamin and there are many other vitamins available. It has to be a painkiller in order for you to be able to sell it. And we worked in that direction that LearnLaunch gave us. Then we showcased our product in many conferences like MassQ. We got crazy signups there. Then we did this independent feasibility study by Teachers Connect, and they interviewed a lot of teachers. And the idea of that was to rip our product apart. And honestly, it's very hard for us as founders to see people ripping our product apart, but that was something that we had to do. And we were not part of those interviews. We were not part of those meetings. We just used to get the recordings. And the feedback that we got at the end of the day, and I quote, they received overwhelmingly positive feedback. from the teachers. It was again a very proud moment for us to be able to hear this from American teachers. And this has been my journey, more or less. Bootstrapped from Cygnus, invested in Orbit. We proved this idea, and then we went on to different accelerators. Now we have also pivoted from B2B to B2C, and we also won the grant, SC Women in Tech. Nida and Athra had been great support in that too. So let's see how it goes and how this path, treats us.
I thank you so much, Navira. I really love the line, and I think Nida does too. She commented that your product should be a painkiller rather than a vitamin. I think it's a very, very important sort of simple idea that you need to hang on to. And keeping all of this in mind, we've had a fantastic conversation today. The one thing that I see in the startup ecosystem right now is incubators, founders, mentors, investors, everybody working in silos. And I think the next goal or the next step forward is to bring people together and sort of have them engage with one another more often, like, we are trying to work with each other as well. Keeping that in mind, the idea of scaling up comes to mind, and I would like to get a bit of an ending note from all of you about how we can take this forward, how we can scale these things for women, everything that all of the innovation that you are all individually doing and creating space for women to work. All of your perspectives, I would love, and I would love for Shiba to start.
Yeah, so I think scaling, I probably actually addressed it last time, but one thing I want to say is before you scale, you have to understand, make sure that the why is clear for you, right? And for your organization. I think for us, fundamentally, it's clear because we are women, but it may not be clear to everybody. Why should there be more women in tech? And so getting the why clear, obviously there's the moral imperative, which is to create an equitable sector where everyone has a chance to be involved and have opportunity. But then there's also a competitive advantage. And I think this is really important for folks to understand, which is that diversity makes businesses much better. The performance of groups is better when they're diverse. Not to mention, there've been a number of studies, for instance, by Goldman Sachs and others, that have shown that women-led companies actually outperform their competitors, right? And then the third thing is that it ensures that the technologies that we're developing, which have the potential to shape our future society, that they will equally benefit everyone. So the first thing I would say is, like, for every organization to get the why on diversity and the why on women empowerment really clear. And then the second is, how then do we shift the balance? And so I touched upon this, which is that there are systemic changes that are needed, which is why we're talking about creating strong pipelines. How do you create those pipelines and support from the ground up? And create those opportunities. And we do need to do that proactively in terms of seeking out groups like PWIC and supporting them and doing mentorship and of all the women that belong in that space. And it also needs to be those cultural shifts that we talked about, which is, making the workplace and more accessible, making the environment remote if needed, or that flexibility, the support, how you do interviews, etc. All of those sorts of things. And I think, again, all of these shifts that we're seeing that have actually even just happened, PWIC just came about in the last few years, right? Like these kinds of things and these conversations, these are great to see. And just doing more of that and more intentionally and more proactively, I think is the way we're going to hopefully see some scale and some shifts happening.
Thank you so much, Shiba, and thank you for reiterating the points that you made earlier about how we can potentially empower and scale even more women in the sector. Coming to Nida, I know that you're already working in this space and doing a lot, and you also have spoken a little bit about how scaling is important. Anything else also that you would like to add as part of just closing the conversation, but hopefully opening a bigger discourse afterwards that allows for more women to sort of think in a different direction and what they can do, because you also talked about women being brave enough to come in. So maybe you could sort of comment on that and how maybe we can empower them at an earlier stage to do so.
So my closing thought with all of this would be that, the way the things are changing, our society is more acceptable towards newer ways of doing things. The work that all you and I who are on this panel that we've been doing for the last few years is making an impact. So to speak that, you are seeing more women enter into all of these incubators as well. The incubators and the people who are running the accelerators, they're also very conscious of this thought. And, we are seeing more women entering into, the entrepreneurial space. We are seeing more girls come into the tech space. Communities like PWIC, you see them starting these conversations time and again. We are now finally, thank God, seeing more role models step forward for younger girls to see what, further down the future might look like should they take that career. It comes down to the fact that, I feel that we need to have support for women to enter into this field from 3 different angles. One would be the government policies. They have to step forward. They have to start giving out cheaper loans for women. They are doing that, but they need to advertise that more. They have to start setting aside certain funds that would be just catered towards women-led sectors that would encourage more women. I'm not talking even about the fancy stuff. I'm talking about bottom of the pyramid entrepreneurs where women are in larger numbers. Second, I would talk about corporate support. The programs like what Standard Chartered is doing is having huge impact. Just within 2 years, we have now created a pool of 42 women who are investment ready, who have their businesses put together, gone through a certain process. They do know how the system works. We are now ready to take about 25 more into the stream. We also need community support groups. Like you said, everybody's working in silos. We need to start talking with each other. We need to start making exchange that, all right, you are starting this program. I believe that within my network, there are certain people who will benefit from what you are offering. And then we kind of be more fluid towards the access to networks that each one of us has. I at least at times come across people who have very close networks. They're very good networks, but they don't open them up. And reaching out to those people, you're basically kind of closing out opportunities for people who are, who have access to you. And I think that's a bit of a disservice. So we need to come out of that silo and we need to start talking to each other more on this. So that's my closing thought. And again, being brave is one thing that, the women have to start these conversations. We have to come up with such ideas that are bankable, that are worth investing in for everything to start rolling in the first place.
Thank you so much, Nida, for that really well thought out and articulated closing note. Coming to Navya, I want your closing note to be as if you're addressing somebody who has just graduated from FAST or NUST or any other program in this country and is thinking about what to do about their career, maybe is working in a corporate job, maybe is stuck in a 9-to-5. I want you to sort of tell us what you would say to that girl or that young woman who wishes to be an entrepreneur someday or has an idea that she thinks is worth banking. And what would you tell her to be brave enough to step out of her comfort zone?
Yes, I think right now it's a great time to be an entrepreneur. The reason is, Bill Gates, I was just reading this article and he said that the way the vaccines and the whole system is working, we probably will be in lockdown till 2020. So it's, again, 1.5 years more. A lot of things are going to change. And literally, these are the times when change is the only constant. There will be gaps. People will be doing things in a different way. There will be a lot of opportunities which will be created because of this change. And if you are smart enough, if you can read the situation and you can build something which can cater to any of the problems or any of the way that people make it easier for people to come to this new reality, I think you will succeed. And for a women entrepreneur, there are a lot of opportunities like SE Women in Tech. I think there are a lot of opportunities focusing just on women. And you do get this feeling you talk to mentors, you talk to other people, and they're always helping. So you just need to come out of your comfort zone a little bit and take that leap of faith. And I think all is going to be well. I think the stage has set, lighting, direction, everything is there. You just need to write a good story and be there and perform, and you'll succeed.
Thank you so much, Never. I think that's a beautiful note to sort of close our conversation on. I would really love to thank all three of you once again for joining and being so patient, and also for our audience for being so patient. We had some technical difficulties and had to switch platforms at the last minute, so we started a little bit late. Thank you so much for still being here with us and being engaged in our conversation. Shiba Najmi from Code from Pakistan, I am so glad. I was a little starstruck through this conversation. I'm such a fan, and I'm so glad that we got to have a chance to chat today. Nida, I think you're doing wonderful things at InnoVentures Global, and thank you so much for telling us all about them, and maybe perhaps we can get inspired. And Navarath, you yourself are an inspiration, having, sort of done so much at such a young age, as well as, achieving the things that you have already with both your startups. So thank you to our esteemed panel, and thank you for our audience for joining us today. I think it's time that we sign off.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.